What's up, guys? We're live. Gonna start the show here in a second. Always nice to be a couple minutes early. Start my record for the podcast, and we'll get going here. See you guys, some of you guys in the live chat already. Looks like we got 4 calls here too today, so it should be a good show. Got our buddy Peter Stain School calling, who used to edit this show. So that will be fun, and I'm sure he tried to run some sort of ridiculous bluff. As always, I'm taking a look at some of these mostly positive responses on Twitter to my Mike Postle post. As I see our first caller just joined us, so we can start the show now. But our first, the Mike Postle post that I made, because he dropped the defamation suit against us, so I feel free to comment now. And I said I haven't run across a winning poker player that didn't think Mike Postle cheated. And then, of course, there's just one or two idiots that chime in. They're not even defending. They just want to be contrarian about, oh, well, I think he cheated, but you can't prove it. You can't prove it. I won't follow the herd. And it's like, dude, these fucking idiots. I mean, basically, what ends up happening is that you get into these situations where you have like a 1 in, say, like 10 million chance of something happening, and somebody will point to the lottery as an example, and they'll be like, well, if it's just 1 in 10 million, that would mean that everybody who won the lottery is guilty, right, of something, and not just pure luck. And that's the argument they're giving for Mike Postle, and it's like, that's the stupidest thing. We sort of know how he did it, right? And he had the opportunity to do it. It's just so dumb. I mean, it's kind of a reflection of today's society and the way that people argue, or they'll take like little insignificant bits of an argument that might be like a little bit off, like in terms of data, to try to throw the entire argument off. But anyways, all right, let's get into it here because we got 3 people on the line. So, no, you can prove it. You have. Oh, thanks, Josh Adcock. All right, let's do this thing. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Crush Live Call-Ins. I'm your host here, Bart Hanson. It is April 5th, Monday, April 5th, and we do this show every single Monday at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time, unless I'm doing some commentary, or as maybe I'll be playing on one of these streams coming up because my wife just got the first dose of the second shot of Moderna. I'm all vaccinated, so it won't be long till I am headed back to the live streets. But if you want to get on the show, you can do so by pre-submitting your hand. Email me, bart@crushlivepoker.com, bart@crushlivepoker.com. I read them all, and I will always give priority to CLP subscribers, and I will give you a personalized answer. Speaking of CLP, the new CLP version 2 has launched. It is out, and I haven't done a hard promo of it yet. I'm going to wait about, I would say, a few weeks to a month, make sure all the kinks are out. Not all the features are up and moving yet, but it's been sort of a long road, a long delayed road, and I'm so glad I'm off the old site now too. But if you do want to check out Crush Live Poker, you can take a look at the coupon code in the description here on this live stream. And if you do subscribe, you will get access to the video of this after the fact. Of course, we put up the best hands anyways in a YouTube format, and I will be releasing also on top of the sort of the 3 call-in shows that I do per week, sort of a hand review. Now, another one from High Stakes Poker went up. There's a lot of hands. I watched the entire High Stakes Poker thing. Tom Dwan, Phil Ivey, Phil Hellmuth, a little bit of Shamoff, and then I'll be taking a look at some old Poker Night in America hands that I played as well. So a lot of YouTube action. Of course, subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button if you like what you see here. And let's get into it here. We are going to start off here. This is Zach, and of course, I will monitor the live chat here as well. And let's get into it here with Zach in California. What's up, Zach?
Hey, Bart, how's it going?
Good.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. So about a week and a half ago, we were playing 5-5 at the Bicycle Casino in LA.
5-5 a week and a half ago at the bike. Now, I was talking to somebody, I want to say, oh, I know. I had coffee with Mariano, the vlogger. He was here. He played on the Dallas TCH stream on Saturday. We had some coffee on Sunday morning, so yesterday. And he was telling me that all the LA clubs were opening up indoors starting today. Do you know anything about that? Is that accurate?
Yeah, so confirmed that this past weekend that today, the bike at least, I'm not sure about the Commerce or Hawaiian, but they're moving indoors today. So out of the
Oh,
tents.
wow. So they're taking everything from outside and just basically putting it inside.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're going to have anything sporadically placed indoor versus outdoor or anything like that, just to continue to spread it out. But I did know that they were moving poker inside.
Cool. All right. So 5-5 no limit at the bike, which of course, unless they change the structure, is a 1K cap game, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So we just sat down. We literally just saw the end of a hand play out. So currently, as the pandemic tables exist, it's eight-handed because
Okay.
everyone's separated by plexiglass.
Okay.
We are on the button, and there's a straddle under the gun for $10.
Okay.
Under the gun plus two, limps for 10. And literally, as I was sitting down, we saw this player get it all in with another player with nine deuce off. And he was four bet pre flop, so he was playing a little wild.
Okay.
So we were excited to see him get into the hand.
Okay.
The rest of the action folded to me on the button, and I raised to 35 with Jack eight, both hearts.
So you're ISOing one limper to 35 with Jack of Hearts, Eight of Hearts. Is that right?
Correct.
That's a little bit on the wide side, I would say.
Okay. Thank you, and good to know. So I'm pretty much a rec player across the board, so
So that gives you the
excited.
right to play a little bit looser, huh? I mean, listen, I used to make these sort of, uh, you know, I guess you could say isolation types raises and stuff when I played at Commerce 510 stuff. I mean, I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it's just, Jack 9 suited, sure, Jack 8 suited. This guy's 1K deep too, along with you, I'm assuming.
Correct.
All right, so you've got a little bit of stacked up. So you make it 35. Okay.
Small blind folded and big blind completes.
Big blind calls, not the straddle. So he calls like a full 30, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then UTG plus two calls.
All right. So two callers. You got Jack 8 of hearts on the button as an ISO to 35. Looks like the pot's probably going to be about $100 after the drop or so, something like that. Okay.
Yep. So the flop comes six of hearts, 10 of hearts, three of clubs.
Six of hearts, 10 of hearts, three of clubs. Is that right?
Correct.
So you've got a flush draw, front door flush draw, and an overcard and some backdoor straight draws, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
The action checks to me, and I bet half pot with that flush draw.
So check to hero, and you bet like what, $50, something like that?
Yeah, 55.
55? Okay.
The big blind calls
Okay.
and plus two folds.
All right. So next to at calls, big blind calls, limper fold. So now it looks like the pot's probably like 210 or something like that. Of course, the big blind should be slightly stronger here than obviously if the guy, the limper, had called. Like if you had bad big blind fold, limper had called, limper probably could have, a pocket pair, thinking you have ace king, 6x. The big blind really shouldn't be calling here with like 7 7 8 8, but I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility at 5-5 that the big blind could call with those hands, right?
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, assuming at this point that they could certainly have a lot of suited connectors, any of the sets potentially, as well as I could have that, except for us being able to have the overs in that regard.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking as the turn starts to come off as well,
By the way,
which was
some people are also noting that your ISO is a little bit on the small side. Usually, when I played 510, I would straight open to 35 with no limpers, and then one limp would be 45. So, but it's a straddled pot. If the pot wasn't being straddled like every time, that's kind of another thing here too. Was it just an occasional straddle?
honestly, I don't know because I had just sat
Okay.
down, but kind of my rationale at that point was having just seen Under the Gun +2 go a little crazy. So wasn't sure if I was going to get three bet or anything in that regard, given that he just got stacked. Um,
You didn't know if you were going to get limp erased.
yeah, anything crazy like that. So
All right, so
good
let's
to
go
know.
to the turn.
Turn was nine of spades.
The turn's the nine of spades. So now you pick up the good old 15 out mega draw. Again, for those listening
Indeed, yeah.
to on the podcast, you've got Jack 8 of hearts and it's 10 of hearts, 6 of hearts, 3 of clubs, turns the 9 of spades. So you now have a gigantic draw. Now, normally in a spot like this, it's really not the best card for you. I mean, I would rather almost see like the Queen of Hearts here. I would rather see the Queen of Hearts here in the sense that even though it gives you less outs, you would, or like even, well, excuse me, not, I mean, excuse me, an offsuit, so sort of high card, heart would give you a flush because there's just more fold equity. I don't know how often you are gonna get a fold here when you look at this specific configuration of next to act calling on the flop. If we assume that 10x is not folding on the turn, so he's got all the 10x, right?
Mhm.
Then I just don't necessarily know what's going to fold out now. Now, with that being said, though, you've got such a massive draw. I don't actually mind continuing to bet. Usually, what the bet would be here, with a hand like this would be a large bet. This is kind of where it gets a little bit confusing for people because they'd be like, well, isn't this like a good card for the big blind? If the caller was like opening to like 3x or online like at 2.5x and it was heads up, right, against a big blind defend, sure, absolutely. But look at the situation. He's basically making it 35 at, 510 with the straddle. There's already a limper in there. The guy shouldn't be calling that wide where he's going to have a bunch of junk. Again, he very well might be. I would be somewhat surprised if a bet gets through here, but I think any hint of fold equity with the massive amount of equity that you have, plus you block the nuts. Not saying that you wouldn't necessarily get check raised by a set here on the turn, but there's just less combos of 7-8 that it's like going to be always like a pure check raise here. So I mean, I honestly don't mind a bet, and what I would do here is I would bet probably 2/3 plus, and that because it's interesting too because the over bet if he's not folding out 10x doesn't really matter, right? But I'd probably go 2/3 plus, and then you fire like if you miss, you probably fire like a blank sort of high card. Obviously you don't need to fire a jack, but a king, a queen, or an offsuit ace, and you still have well, queen makes your straight too, but you still have like and maybe you give up on some blanks. I mean that's basically the approach that I would take here.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because the nine of spades turned me the world. I sized up a little bit and continued to bet after the big blind immediately checked on the turn. So we sized up to 135.
Well, that's not quite sizing up, but I mean, I have the way that I would think about this too is again, if it was like next to act, excuse me, if it was last to act that called, or you were heads up on the flop, you could really put the hammer down here. But it would be surprising to see, especially when you have hearts, so there's less of a chance your opponent has hearts. It would be somewhat surprising to see your opponent fold after calling on the flop next to act and then again to this sizing. So you bet 135, okay?
Yep, and the big blind calls pretty quickly.
Oh, there you go. 270 looks like it's about 480 here. Okay. Let's go to the river.
Yep. So the river was the queen of clubs,
Okay.
giving up the middling straight.
The middling straight? Well, I mean, what do you mean the middling straight?
The out of the three straights that could be made on the board, having the one in the middle.
Let me ask you this question though. Like this is where, and again, I mean, I just kind of laugh sometimes because I think some people are trolling me a little bit. There was a hand where that we posted up a couple weeks ago where someone said, first of all, I would look at the middling straight being 7-8 here, and I'll tell you why. I understand there's three combos of straights. So some people were giving me, there were like 5 comments in the ethical dilemma video that we posted with Sean when he gave the guy the money back, and the guy had like
Yep.
the second nut straight, and I called it the nuts because it was the effective nuts. And it's just amazing to me how many people actually take the time to type out 7-8's the nuts. It's just so dumb. The reason why I bring it up here is that how can the guy have King Jack here if you have the Jack of Hearts in your hand? I'm not saying you say that, but like it's really like the only way that he can have King Jack here is if he had like a flush draw, right? You have Jack 8 of Hearts, therefore you have the nuts. That's basically what I'm saying. So
I
I wouldn't
100%.
even consider it like the middling straight. I mean, you've got a super strong hand. I'm assuming he checked to you.
Uh, so this is actually the interesting thing why I had originally reached out to you, if you recall from my email. But again, he had been previously checking very quickly, not by speaking, by tapping his hand on the felt. And so I'm pretty sure I saw his hand move. And so I assumed that as he was checking quickly again. And I actually started to accumulate a bet after a little bit of thought. And I, out of turn, apparently bet $225 before he kind of like stood up abruptly and told me and the dealer that I acted out of turn.
Okay, so you thought he checked, you bet 225, then he said no, I haven't acted yet. It's really weird in LA. I mean, obviously you're not trying to do anything, right? You thought the guy checked, but I think they may have changed the rule because I sort of screamed bloody murder about how like out of some. I mean, when I was playing, like out of like out of turn action like was not binding, which was so ridiculous because you can see like so a guy in your spot, say you knew that the guy didn't do anything and you checked behind, but the guy hadn't done anything. So if the guy didn't change his action from up front, you then had total action again. So let's say you're in position and you check out a turn in position. They're like, no, it's not your turn, right?
When I've
And
seen it
and then
done
the guy
before,
bets or checks. You still have full action, which is so ridiculous. Like out of turn sort of action should be binding if the action doesn't change. But obviously, you're
I
not
think that's
meaning
the case
anything.
now.
Yeah, I mean,
I've seen that happen before where the out of turn action was binding
uh,
if the previous player didn't change
right.
anything. So I did apologize
Or
and I pulled
or
my
by the
my
way,
bet.
or another ridiculous example would be the guy out of turn in position would bet. They'd say, "Oh, it's not your turn," right? Then the guy from
Mhm.
out of position would check, and then the guy in position would check behind. It's classic LA. So you bet out of turn. Okay, so you stop the action. Then what happens here?
I apologized. I pulled my bet back, but
Okay.
still left the 225 like right by the line with
Yeah.
the implication that if he checked, obviously I had already kind of made my action. So the dealer was kind of aligned to the situation that the big blind was going to act now. He thought for another 30 seconds or so before putting out a bet of 450. So he essentially like min clicked my out of bet action, if that makes sense.
So he bet 450 on the river, 450 into 480, right? And he's put in, so he's got about, I don't know, like what, 450 left basically, 450 to 500 left. I think I already answered your question really. When you look at this hand in terms of hand reading, you have the nuts here in the sense that, if you look at the configuration of the hand, I mean, maybe one out of like 1,000 times, like some idiot shows up with like King Jack of clubs or King Jack off just because he's a moron, but you can't not shove all in here. You have the hearts in your hand. Now, if you didn't have hearts in your hand and you somehow made it, that could be a different story. He might have King Jack of hearts, but he only has like 450 more. I mean, you're basically going to min raise him all in, right? If I'm doing the stack sizes correctly.
Yeah, you'd be correct there.
Oh, this is, yeah, you're
And
just jamming all day long. I mean, you've got the heart in your hand for any hand.
yeah,
And he had a guy who had, behind him on the flop to call too.
yeah. Unfortunately, I think I ended up making a mistake and ended up calling. And actually, no, I agree with you. I made a mistake and only end up calling. I was a little confused and a little, I guess, embarrassed at that point in which I acted out of turn. So when he min clicked me, it's not a constant play that I see pretty regularly. And when it is, it's nearly always for value and for the nuts, but also having just realized, obviously, on the turn and previously that King Jack of Hearts is impossible for him to have and therefore unlikely for him to have it all. I think I was just confused when I was calling at that point, like having that thought of like, I technically have yes, the
So
best straight that can happen in that situation,
so
but
so you got sort of like
flustered.
you got flustered by the fact that he's basically betting twice what you were going to bet, which is going to show obviously strength. Just a couple quick things on this. Number one, you haven't done anything wrong, so I'd feel absolutely not bad about shoving because you were going to bet anyway. So it was pretty obvious, and you have to shove. I mean, there's just no question about it. Like, you have to shove. He just can't show up here really with. I mean, like I said, once in a great while, he's going to show up here with King Jack, but just shove, and he's going to call because it's basically a min raise. What ended up happening? So you called, and then what did he have?
Turned over 7-8 of spades.
Yeah. Okay. That I would consider a middling straight because there's just no King Jack in there. Well, this from his perspective, that's actually the bottom straight, right? Because you can have Jack 8 and King Jack, but you in essence have the nuts. But yeah, I mean, especially with the flushing hand, blocking, you just go, and it doesn't even matter how deep you are. You're just gonna go. But I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you. Appreciate.
All right, Zach. All right, let's go to our next caller here. This is going to be Walker. Walker actually sort of has a non-hand question, sort of a question about game selection, bankroll issues, stuff like that.
Yeah, that kind of thing. How's it going, man?
Good.
The new site looks super slick, man. Very good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, not all the features are necessarily hooked up yet. That's going to be a work in progress over the next few weeks. But I made an executive decision. I was like, turn it on. You know what I mean? I've been promoting it. It's like 80 or 90% there. There's a couple of kinks, not kinks, but just like, I found a couple spelling errors but I'm very pleased. So I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
really, really attractive, if nothing else. And I mean, so far the functionality seems mostly on par with what it was before. So pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah. So anyways, my situation is I'm kind of like long time, like been playing occasionally, super recreationally on and off for years, never really taking it seriously, never really studying or anything, but, kind of keeping track of my results. And so I always did like, okay, basically break even knit for 10 years. And basically at the beginning of 2020 last year, so maybe like 13, 14 months ago, I decided, you know what, I'm going to start taking this seriously, start playing regularly, studying, and just seeing kind of like how far I could take it. And of course, that was just in time for everything to shut down from COVID. And so
Okay.
I was like, oh, this is great. Excellent timing. So I was like, all right, well, I mean, I've got all this extra time that I didn't even have before. So I've just been spending a lot of time studying, tons of Crush Live poker material, some stuff from other training sites. I've had a few sessions with a friend of mine who's a coach, and putting in a bunch of hands, like 90,000 hands on Poker Bros. I don't really like playing online. It's not that enjoyable to me.
Well, that's
but
pretty.
I
mean, that's pretty impressive because as far as I know, Poker Bros doesn't really have a version of what you would call like Blitz or Zone or Zoom or whatever you would call it, right? Like you can play 4 tables at a time. I guess you can have a couple accounts, so you could play 8. But where my raw sort of hand, when I play like a chunk of hands, has actually been coming from playing Blitz or Zone or Zoom because people just play tight. So it's you sort of play it more close to kind of the theory, which was kind of what I was looking for to, sort of round out my theory. And I've played a shit ton on Poker Bros too. And it does mimic a live game, obviously the drop and stuff and the rake is high, but you said that your results have been decent, right?
Yeah, like decent up to, I started at 10 cent, 20 cent, then went to 30, 60 cent. And then I've been beating 50 cent, $1, like comfortably for, all across all those stakes, like a total of 90,000 hands. So anyways, not really something I like to do, but I figure like, obviously I can learn or like just get in tons of reps and at least get my like pre-flop stuff just super memorized and put myself in a lot of spots. So anyway, so I got my second dose of the vaccine last weeks, and everything, you know, I'm in Southern California, everything's reopening. And so I'm like, all right, let's go back in. So, you know, I kind of feel like I'm going in for the first time just because my knowledge base and skill level is, you know, I feel like a totally different player than I was when I used to play live in the past. So I guess my two questions are, one is there any like specific CLP content or specific games slash stakes I should play to kind of like transition my mindset into the live arena? And then the second question would be, what stake should I jump into given like my relative live inexperience, but trying to counteract how brutal the Southern California drop is?
Well, so you played live before, right? You just didn't take it really seriously.
Yeah, just like, I
Right.
mean, like I said, realistically, I think I have like 350 hours over the course of, but like spread out over like 8 years.
Okay.
And realistically, I'm just super nitty at heart. So that's how I've stayed afloat, is just by folding a lot.
Well, so I mean, obviously, I mean, it's interesting because I saw a lot of euros and stuff come to Commerce right around Black Friday and after Black Friday, or just even American kids that played online, and I kind of giggled about how poorly they played at first, and the learning curve was slightly different. Actually, sometimes it ranged a lot from person to person. Like these guys might have been winning players online, and they weren't even winners at 510. It took them like 3 to 6 months to actually adjust to sort of the live games. If you have live experience and you sort of know how to roll, you know how it sort of rolls, like it's, you know, you've got a leg up. Listen, live games are so much easier than online games. I mean, you just see a little Poker Bros because Poker Bros basically mimics, you know, live poker. So if you can win even at say 50 cent a dollar online, you should have absolutely no trouble winning live. Now, I will say I'm actually going to make a recommendation in terms of maximizing how much you can win live, which is somewhat might sound counterintuitive to some people. And then you actually have to throw in the LA sort of drop, which is, like you said, kind of brutal. But if you play anywhere near the range of hands that you play, say, like in a 9-handed game or even a 6-handed game online live, you're not going to win as much as you could. You would be playing too tight because the players are so bad and they make so many like gross post flop errors that I don't think that playing, say, like a 15% VPIP 9-handed, yeah, sure, you're going to win, but you're not going to win as much as you could if you got more involved. Now, with that being said, the drop is fucking brutal in California. Now, people told me that it was actually going up by another dollar too, at least at the bike, and I want to say now it's $7. No, I think it's probably $6 flat on the flop. This is not a rake, it's a drop, meaning that it doesn't matter how big the pot is, it's a flat drop. If one person limps in and the blinds check, they take that $6 when they get to the flop, and I think one on the turn, and I think it's 5 flat on the flop, 1 on the turn, 1 on the river, and 1 for the bad beat jackpot. So if you get to the river now, it's $8. They take a modified drop too, even if there's no flop, of like a dollar or two. I think Commerce takes $2. So yeah, man, like, I mean, I used to not really take that into consideration when I would play, say, like 5-5, like back in 2012, because I used to sort of get paid as I would get sort of rake back before I would commentate on Live at the Bike. But then even back then, I take a look at sort of my records and some of the hands that I was playing, and I was like, wow, like over limping here with like 5-7 of diamonds over 2 limpers, right? With everyone having an $800 stack, like, is that a profitable over limp? When the flat drop getting to the river here is going to be $8. Remember, it's not a percentage of the pot. So I think that I would try to, if I were you, what I would do is I would actually try to count, literally try to count the number of pots you win over a session, extend that out over a session, and try to calculate how much it costs you to play. That's something that I never really did, but once these flat drops are getting like super, super high, I think it's worth consideration. Now, I know people that played 5-5, Dave Tuckman's one of them, that played 5-5, 1K cap at the bike, and could make $75, $80 an hour. That was like sort of a top win rate. This is a 1K cap game. I've heard Commerce 5-5, 500 cap. People were making like 50. But as the drop goes up, obviously your win rate goes down. You know, people are studying a little bit more. But I think that $50 an hour is a very good win rate at 5-5, 1K cap. And absolutely, this is like the golden age of poker right now, especially here in Texas, where there aren't going to be any foreigners probably here in the US for the whole year. And that's really what sucked up a lot of sort of the recreational money, not just the recreational players losing, but the poor behavior and sort of poor attitude of like Euro. And when I say Euros, I talk about South Americans and Europeans and Australians. I call them all Euros, and it would just drive the recreational players to basically play home games. The atmosphere was not enjoyable for them. So you take that equation out. This is a gold rush here in 2021. It's probably going to be the best year for live poker, I would say, maybe we'll ever see again, up until when they start like allowing people back into the country. What kind of like bankroll do you have in terms of what kind of game you think that you're hopping into, or what considering hopping into?
I mean, what I would like to do is just kind of set aside a chunk of money and say like, okay, this is my bankroll, and you know, if I go on a down streak and I need to move down in stakes, like I feel comfortable doing that. But I can kind of set aside whatever, like I don't have I can take a chunk of cash, however much it may be, and say like, okay, this is my bankroll, and I feel fine operating within that. So yeah, it's really just like balancing the like my I mean, even though I understand like I used to play a lot of live poker, but it was like from a completely different mindset. So I really do feel like I'm kind of starting like a second wave of my poker interest. Here's
the thing about a little bit of math here too. Like in a 1K cap game, if you have a really, really high win rate, I'm talking over $50 an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd probably, and especially if you can replenish your bankroll, meaning that like, you know, people have to be more conservative with their bankrolls if they're going to go broke and they can't replenish it. It doesn't sound like that's the case with you.
No, it's not the case.
Well, then, I mean, like, even if your poker bankroll was like $10,000, of course you could go and play at 5-5. And that's the thing in LA. I've always been saying this is sort of the anchor of Crush Live Poker. One of the best sort of pieces of advice I think that I can give people is like real money starts at 5-5 in LA. Like if you want to play for profit, you just need to, it's a race to 5-5 because the drop's the same at all the levels. So if you're playing 1-3, you're still getting an $8 drop, right? The players at 5-5 aren't that much better, and you don't see as many like short stacks at the table too. That's always the problem with the super small games. So just go play 5-5. But what I was going to say is like, if you had like a crazy win rate at 5-5, say it was like $75 an hour, which is like, you know, that's 7.5 big blinds per 30 hands. So it's like 20 to 25 big blinds per 100, which is an achievable win rate sometimes in live poker. If you do the math out on that, I mean, the chances that you go on like a 6 or 7 buy-in downswing are pretty low. I mean, people give me shit I've done multiple challenges on Crush Live Poker. Maybe I was lucky. I beat the game 510 Commerce, you know, for a very, very high win rate between say like 2012 and 2017. I don't think I ever went on more than like a $17,000 downswing, something like that at 510, 1500 cap. Now, maybe I'm a little bit lucky, but if you can be very, very aggressive with your bankroll and you can replenish, you should not be playing lower than 5-5. Get your feet wet at 5-5. I don't know where you live in California. Another sort of hack or a pro tip is a lot of these Indian casinos like a Morongo, Pachanga, when they run 5-10, those are the best like 5-10 games. Like they're going to be better than Commerce games. So you can kind of look around and go over there. But get like a couple 100 hours in at 5-5. You're going to be like, holy shit, these guys are fucking terrible. And then you'll see some of those guys like play in the 5-10 game as well.
Got it. Cool. All right.
So,
that seems really good. So, I mean, in terms of like kind of getting my mind re-geared or refashioned over the next couple weeks before I jump back in, you don't think do anything different than I've been doing?
No, I mean, I think that if you've put in a lot of time with training and stuff and you've played a bunch online, just get into the live streets and get your rhythm back in the sense that get your patience, right? Because it can be boring. It's
right.
a 2 blind game. There's no antes. People play with invisible antes, of course, like Sklansky said. If they didn't, the game would be dead. No limit without antes should not even be a poker game. It's not a real poker game. Like, unless somebody is playing as if there's antes, which is that whole thing about invisible antes. No Limit should be a dead game. That's what Sklansky said back in 2001, 2002. No Limit is always supposed to be played with antes. Any form of No Limit, whether it's Hold'em, whatever. That's why in tournaments there's antes. You're not supposed to be playing two blind No Limit Hold'em without antes. There's no incentive to enter the pot, especially when people are opening to like 4x to 20 at like 5-5.
But everybody's
could literally play 5% of hands, right? Now, is that going to be the most profitable approach? No. But I think it might even be more of a rhythm thing. Like, hey, like get used to going back there and sitting and not playing a hand for like 45 minutes, not tilting off. It's a lot of emotional stuff too, right? So,
yeah, for sure.
But maybe in a few months, give us a trip report or something, or send me an email. I'll have you back on the show.
Cool, man. Sounds
Okay?
good. I appreciate it, Bart.
All right. Take it easy. And
Later.
take it easy. All right. Next caller here. One of my favorite guys from the Cleveland area. He was the very first editor for the Crush Live call-in videos. And he did a bunch of free bonus videos over on Crush Live Poker. So even if you're not a Crush Live Poker subscriber, you can go and check out the new site. Go to crushlivepoker.com. Go to videos, which actually, if you're not signed in, you have to go sort of towards the bottom part of the page. You can sign up for free too, but the videos isn't in the header. That's actually a specific design choice that we made. But go down to videos and go to free bonus videos. And Peter Stay in School, I think, maybe did what? The first 20 videos, Peter, did you do?
Yeah, something like that. Maybe not quite 20, but like something like that.
So what's going on? How's the travel industry?
It's still a little slow for sure. Like there's some good signs, but stuff's still pretty slow for sure.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So you're playing some poker now, huh? Getting back into it?
Yeah, actually, like because travel's slow, I've been playing a little bit more poker. Just app games so far, but plan to actually start playing some live here at LA in the next few weeks.
Oh, you're gonna be in LA. You see, squish my tomato.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, I feel very, very strongly that this year, right now, probably till like the end of the calendar year, might be as good a year that we'll ever see again in live poker because of the non-foreign factor. If you follow me.
Yeah, I've heard. Like I've been talking with Mark a lot, and I hear all the same things. Like
Mark,
the games are
squish my
just the best
tomato.
they've been.
The game, yeah, and then also a couple other subs too. Chad Fishcake and Danny at the bike. Like they told me that they're like the best games like in 10 years in California right now. That might have been a function of the degen factor with COVID, and like in the middle of COVID, a lot of the player types skewed towards degens. So it'll be interesting to see as we come back around to normalcy.
Yeah, I'll be excited to play again for sure. But yeah, this hand was an app game, but like a pretty soft app game with like pretty much just like the kind of normal players you'd see at like a 5-5, 5-10 live game.
What was the size? What was the size of the game?
It's a 2-4 no limit.
2-4. Is this like on poker or some shit like that?
Yeah.
All right. So agent app, poker, and again, these agent apps, the whole thing is that they're not like Poker Stars or like ACR or whatever. Like the sites don't hold the money. It's like sort of a collection of clubs. Like somebody starts a club, they get players, a bunch of clubs get together and they join basically a player pool called a union. And it does mimic live poker. It's just that it's kind of a rake game. It's kind of similar to a home game in the sense of what kind of rake back deal can you get? Are you going to get stiffed over, right, by your club if you're a winning player? It's a whole thing, but it's definitely a lot softer than traditional online poker.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's a 2-4 game. In this particular hand, there's a straddle to 8. There's a limp under the gun +1. Villain in the hand is on the button, and we're 824 effective to start.
Okay.
He makes it 34. The small blind folds, and then we're on the big blind with King 9 of diamonds. I guess this is the first decision point. I ended up 3-betting to 120. I don't think I really want to have any flats here, especially with the limp under the gun.
So I was going to say, how's the pot getting this big? So there's one limp and this guy just made it 34 over the top of a limp. No straddle or anything? Or
there's a straddle. So there's a straddle to 8 and then a limp under the gun.
Okay, that makes more sense. All right. I thought I missed something. So one limp under the gun. What is it, 8-handed or 6-handed or something?
Yeah, I think it's 8-handed at the time.
Okay, so UTG limps, and this guy makes it 34, and you're in the big blind with king 9 of diamonds, so it sounds to me like you're deciding to 3-bet. I mean, obviously, it's very, very cuspy, Peter, right? Very, very cuspy. You want to drive the
Yeah.
limper out. I have seen some pre-flop charts, though, against late position open in configurations. I mean, I've even seen, I've been looking at this like pre-solved thing, Solver Plus. I mean, not all the pre-flop charts are all the same, but that has partials of like king 9 suited, like 3-betting in the small blind against like a button open. Just something in the theory that slightly differs in live play for you guys that are watching. The theory would say that when the button opens, or excuse me, when the button raises over the top of a limper, that's supposed to be a tighter range, right, than straight opening. And I would say for the most part, that's true. I mean, obviously, the button is going to have more straight opens than opens over the top of a limp, but it might not be as tight as you think, as we saw from the first caller today when the guy had like the jack 8 of hearts, right? It's not like, oh, the button's going to open 40% of his hands when it gets folded to him, but if there's a limper, he's only going to open 10% of his hands. It's probably not that drastic. It could be somewhere in the middle. I'm assuming you 3-bet because this probably wouldn't be a call if you didn't, right?
Yeah, I 3-bet. I think it could probably just be a fold. Like I said, I don't really love having flats, especially with the limper. I think just going with king 10 suited plus is fine. Maybe just hold the king 9 B. I went 3-bet to 120 and just the villain called.
So you meant to 120. 3-bet to 120. Obviously the limper folds, right?
Yeah, the limper folds.
And button calls.
Yeah.
So
and for like
pot's like 250.
Sorry, go ahead.
Pot's like 250, something like that.
Yeah, 258, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah, and for some real quick history on the villain, he's like definitely a wreck, but a little bit on the aggressive side. I've seen him like make some bluffs, like definitely not a professional player in any sense, but like one hand he had like 3-bet me turn, like he 3-bet the turn on a 4 straight as a bluff and then bluffed river. So like definitely a guy that can like make some moves, but mostly kind of plays as a normal kind of wreck player.
Okay.
So the flop comes king of spades, king of clubs, queen of spades.
So you flop trips.
Which is,
wow, interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's like a pretty good flop for our range overall, but I wasn't sure if it was one that we like just wanted to like be just betting everything with, just because it can still hit him pretty well. And I thought, given that he was someone who could bluff, I liked having some kings in my checking range. And since I definitely don't have worse than king 9, I decided to check.
And of course, what you're saying here is that, in very extreme configurations, we talk about like in 4-bet pots, you can almost like bet 25% on almost every single board heads up with a few exceptions. In 3-bet pots, you still have a very high volume, but I think what Peter's saying is that even though this is a good board for Peter, it might not always be a bet, as opposed to like if the board came out, like 3-3-7, which would be probably always a bet, right? With the entire range.
I think I would just bet that with everything because he just has so much high card stuff.
Right. So what you're doing here is you're actually taking a king. Of course, there's less of a chance your opponent has a king, right? Because you have a king, and you're taking the worst king and basically checking it. Like you're not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily say it's cutesy, but it's probably a little bit non-standard. But when you do see like, if you go down the line of like king X here, which are the ones that you always bet and which are the ones that you sort of like check? Usually it's like hand quality with the kicker. Like you bet ace king, right? Like down the line.
Yeah, and I think they're like, we definitely could on some runouts, but I don't think we get a like triple off for value on every runout here with like a weak king. So I think like checking some is nice. If it was a guy that like never bluffed, I may like always bet just because like why give him the extra equity and get a little bit of value. But I wanted to check in this spot. Yeah, so I checked and he checked back.
And again, this is a situation where the hand almost sort of plays itself in the sense that what I mean by that is that like whenever you block a lot of value here in the form of having a king and you check, it would be very surprised. Like how often do you think holding king 9 when you check the flop that your opponent's going to bet when check to on king, queen?
I would think, not too often. It's obviously hard for them to have a king. It probably depends a bit on the player, maybe like, and like what size they're going to bet. Like I would be a little bit confused if I just like if you bet like pot. But if you bet like I could see people doing like a lot of betting like a small size with like a bunch of pocket pairs or something, or like just trying to get me to fold. But it would depend on the sizing. But yeah, I'd be surprised to see like a big bet a ton of the time here.
By the way, some people in the chat are saying, well, how can you not bet here if you bet like ace jack and ace 10? I think if you look at this from a perspective that we're checking with some hands, maybe ace jack and ace 10 isn't always a bet, right? I mean, those are the nut no pairs. You have a gut shot, right? If you had ace jack or ace 10, if you were going to check some of the time. So it goes check, check. Okay, so here checks check, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the turn is the ace of spades, so bringing 3 spades.
So the front door spade, king, king, queen with 2 spades out there. Check, check. Turns the king of spades. You have king nine of, the turns the ace of spades. You have king nine of diamonds. Obviously, jack 10 gets there now too. So there's 3 spades out there. Okay.
Yeah, so I decided I wanted to start betting at this point. I think there's plenty of hands to get value from, and also like some hands where you want to like a little bit of protection. Like a hand like deuces with a spade still has like some equity that might fold to a bet or something. I wasn't exactly sure how big I wanted to go. I didn't think like it was a spot that made sense to go huge because I don't know. So I bet 103, like because I think I want to get value from some ace x hands and queen x hands, maybe like queen jack or something.
Yeah, this is an interesting one here too. Like from a theory perspective, like how often you're supposed to be betting this card here on the turn too. Obviously I don't know it necessarily off the top of my head. What you're saying makes a whole lot of sense though, that you might get pieced off by a pair that has a spade in it some of the times, and then of course you're always getting called here, by an ace. I'm trying to put myself in your opponent's perspective. Like, am I checking back like jack 10 suited here on the flop? Am I checking back spade draws? I think some of the time, just because I don't bet when check 2 on the flop, defending to your small blind 3 bet does not mean that I don't necessarily have a flush draw or a jack 10, because I don't really expect you to check fold. Like, it's like you 3 bet the flop. How often are you check folding? You might have, I guess, maybe some like ace x suited that has no backdoor. Maybe that you check fold. I mean, I don't think you always call with like ace 6 of diamonds, right, on the flop. I
think I'd probably just fold that.
So it's interesting. So you bet 103, okay.
Yeah, I bet 103 and villain calls.
So now it looks like the pot's 265-ish, something like that.
Or on the river, it's like 460 after the bet and call.
Oh, excuse me. 465. Yeah, 465. 460, 465. Okay. So let's go to the river. And you guys have, looks like...
around 600 back.
600 back. Okay. So 465. All right, let's go to the river.
So the river is the 6 of spades.
So king, king, queen, 2 spades. Turn here is the ace of spades. You bet 103 call. And now the river here is the 6 of spades. Okay. So 4 spades. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So obviously not the best card. I don't think, I think we obviously have to start with a check because, I mean, he could still have, like, we have too much showdown value to bluff, I think, because he could have a hand worse than a king and just check it back. And we have other hands that I think we could bluff.
By the way, I think that this
can't bet for value.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's right on par here. And then I did, I would say maybe about a month ago, kind of a collection of things talking about check raising the river and check raising the river for value, check raising the river as a bluff. And, I'll repeat it here again, because I think this is a really good example. Normally, if you're looking for hands from out of position to check raise the river as a bluff with, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the time, although we'll talk about it. What type of hand do you want to do that with? You want to do that with a hand that has some showdown value. And the reason why is because when you think of your option on the river, right, you check, well, sometimes your opponent's going to check it back and you win if you have some showdown value, right? Whereas if you had like 5 high and you had no showdown value, you're never going to win if you check unless he bets and you raise. So that's not usually like a good plan. So the hands that you sometimes want to check raise bluff with at the end are hands that you think you can win if the action goes check, check. But when your opponent bets, you think the hand would be taken for a higher EV as a raise, right? As opposed to, say, a call or a fold. I mean, those are really that's kind of what you're looking for. And I think, obviously, this is a good setup for that, whether or not you execute on the raise at the end, meaning that there's really why would you ever bet the river here, right? There'd be no point from up front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really think it makes
Yeah.
much sense to bet. So yeah, I do check,
Mm-hmm.
and then villain bets 200. And I guess like one of the things I wanted to ask you about specifically is like I feel like this like it's the player type of a rec player, but someone who can be a little bit bluffy and can be bluffy in like some kind of creative ways, or at least like some weird ways. And but also like someone who's kind of a standard rec player, and I don't expect to be betting like super thin for value, like what you think their bet range on this river, like for the sizing would be, because there's not like a ton of like value hands they can kind of like super clearly have.
Well, just to again confirm for the people listening to this on the podcast, because this is always one that you kind of want to visualize with a 4 flush board. It's the king of spades, the king of clubs, the queen of spades, the ace of spades, and the 6 of spades. So the jack of spades, right, would be the nut flush, the nut 1 card flush, and then the 10 of spades, of course, would be the second one. And I think what Peter's talking about here, though, is that like, what does this bet represent here besides maybe like what sizing here takes 200? Is like the 10 of spades here really taking 200? I don't, boy, I'm trying to think if I put myself in your opponent's shoes and I had, say, black 10s and I played it this way, especially if I was up against somebody who's capable. But of course, I would consider myself a thinking player. I don't think I would bet with black 10s here at the end when check to, because, sometimes you can get blown off of your equity, and it's just one of these spots where it's like, what are you really calling with here? Like the occasional unfull trip king, you know what I mean? There are some full houses that you might be playing sort of a little bit cagey. So it really should just be the jack of spades. So maybe your question is like, well, if it's the jack and the 10, maybe the raise can be profitable. But if it's just the jack, and the thing that I've learned here, if the guy's recreational, I don't like to try to get him off like the jack of spades here, even if you have all the ace kings and pocket aces and pocket queens or something like that. I might just live to see another day and just fold. Were you thinking he might have the 10 of spades here?
I thought, yeah, I was thinking that was possible, and I thought that like, I definitely not 100% what he would do with the jack of spades, but I think there's a chance this guy might fold it. Because I think he's a guy that's thinking enough that he would at least like know for sure that I'm repping a full house, but maybe he would still just call.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say. I mean, like, I was like just definitely a little bit suspicious of the bet because I didn't think there were a ton of value hands. But on the other hand, I guess it's kind of hard to have a bluff.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to say, can this ever be played as a call? So what is his range of calling the turn after it goes check, check? Because some people are like, well, what hands does he have the 10 of spades or the jack of spades in? Well, he could have pocket jacks with the jack of spades that would be played this way, ace jack with the jack of spades that could be played with this way, and obviously black 10s. Like, I'm not folding black 10s to your $103 bet on the turn with a royal flush draw, right? If I'm in your opponent's position.
Yeah, I guess like kind of my thought on the river was like, I didn't maybe like call it a little more reasonable. I don't think I considered it enough, just because I kind of thought that like, obviously it costs a lot more to bluff raise, but I thought we could just kind of get like a lot of hands to fold, whether he was bluffing or had like thin value by jamming.
So this guy I think this guy makes a good point here too. Scott Alford in the live chat, he said, we're never going to check a boat here though, because flushes are going to check back a bunch. So we always want to bet our boats and our bluffs. It's interesting about our boats. Like, that's kind of how, especially the sort of the weaker the player, the more I do want to just bet. I mean, I don't know how, would I be checking a boat here that much? I would be very afraid that it would get checked through,
There's another thing I thought of. I think that like, I think I would maybe check. I think I would mostly just bet too. I think if I would maybe check aces just because you're not blocking a king, and maybe maybe he has like king queen somehow, and if you bet river with aces, he doesn't raise, but he'll always call a check jam or something. But
and the only way that you could really call, as opposed to, I guess, fold, would be somehow if he was turning an ace into a bluff. But why would he necessarily do that, right? Because you could just be giving up, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So what'd you end up doing?
So I ended up jamming. I mean,
Peter.
I thought it was, yeah. I thought it was. I definitely wanted like a king to bluff, and I was like, well, this is my worst king, so I'll just use I'll use the two king nine suited combos, but I ended up getting snapped by the king queen suited.
Oh no!
So it's not. Yeah.
I think the crux of this hand comes back to, like, I don't know how often the 10 of spades is betting. And if really, like, you're just trying to get the guy off of the jack of spades, and he does also have some boats here that are occasionally slow played through, right? Just due to sheer combinations, then it can't be a check raise bluff if he just has the jack of spades and some boats, because I don't even think, at what rate is the jack of spades folding? And then you sort of go down that road of, like, how often are you actually checking a boat? I mean, here's the thing, like, I would have anytime I'm up against somebody capable, like if I was playing against you and like one of these situations came up where I bet the jack of spades at the end, I'd have a very, very difficult time folding, because I knew you'd be capable and you might be pulling some, some bullshit or something like that, right?
Yeah, like I think in the moment I didn't really want to call, but I thought that for some reason I thought his betting range on the river just could be probably wider than it is, and I thought like if his range was wide, then like I could just get a lot of folds from a jam, and like it is a lot harder for him to have a house when I have a king.
But how wide though? Like how wide did you think his betting range was at the end?
I thought it's not the best logic, because I thought that like he could have maybe like some jack of spades, 10 of spades, and then like some bluffs too. But like if I think he would mostly have to have a good amount of bluffs, and then at that point it just gets kind of close to calling, because I don't think he'd ever bluff with anything that beats us. I mean, like maybe once, and I guess we even chop with worse kings, so that's not even like we would maybe, like if you turn king 10 into a bluff, I think almost everyone just checks that back.
I think you're going way too far down. You're going way too far down the line. I just like every time
I think it was a bad bluff.
Yeah, it's just a little bit fancy. And again, to expect someone to if they're only betting the jack of spades, and then basically to expect them to fold that. I think it's actually interesting from the villain's perspective. If you're a good player versus a good player, Peter, if you put yourself in your opponent's perspective, right? Is Jack with the jack of spades even a bet at the end? Like, are you betting against yourself with the jack of spades at the end? Should it be a bet?
I think it may. It would depend on like what size I win. I think I haven't thought about the spot really, and I have no idea what the theory is. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if you were supposed to like bet really small on the river as the button, because it's just pretty hard to have bluffs, and like that makes it a little bit easier to bet wide with some hands like the jack of spades. So like maybe you could even bet like 100 to 150, and then I think that like if that's the size you're going to use, you can probably bet it. But I wouldn't like. It's kind of awkward, to bet like the jack of spades.
I don't know.
Like
it would not be surprising if the theory says this is not a bet with the jack of spades. I don't know. It just opens yourself up to. Or some like sort of weird thing where you're supposed spades, to bet and call. Yeah. Anyways, good to talk to you, Peter. Have fun in LA. Maybe I'll see you out there soon. Appreciate the call. All right.
Thanks, Bart.
All right, one more caller here. This is Matt Foxer, I believe, on CLP. Foxer, longtime CLP subscriber. Matt, have you had a chance to check out the new site?
Yeah, I checked it out. It looks good. I like it.
Awesome. So you got a hand for us here to wrap it up today?
Yeah, this is from Parks again, the 10-10 game there, and I took a little bit of a non-standard line on this one. I just thought it was sort of interesting, and probably made a mistake, and thought you might have some ideas about this one. So it's a 7-handed game. There's about half the players, I would say, are regs, and it's playing a mandatory strat. I mean, everyone's straddling. It's not mandatory, but we're playing 10-10-20. So it's seven-handed, and we're 36-50 effective with the villain in his hand.
What's the size of the game again?
And 10-10-20
At
Parks.
At Parks, that's what I thought. So 10-10-20 at Parks, 56-50 effective?
36-50.
36-50 effective, okay. Okay.
And I'm first to act, so effective low jack, I guess. And I opened to 60 with 8 of clubs, 8 of hearts.
Is that the standard open pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much.
8 of clubs, 8 of hearts?
Yep.
Okay.
Folds to the button, and he 3-bets to 280.
Okay.
So a little big, but we're deep, so not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And folds the blinds, folds back to me, and I make the call.
So your head's up.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're going to the flop. The pot's 600, and the flop comes out 7 of spades, 6 of clubs, 3 of spades.
7 of spades, 6 of clubs, 3 of spades. Oh, I remember this hand. Oh, this is where I told you that I went into the pre-solved app because I wanted to see the flop response. So I actually just plugged this into Solver Plus. And again, Solver Plus is kind of a shortcut way to look at some I mean, I will give them credit for what they're trying to do over there in Crafty Wheel with this. You just have to understand how to use it because it's pre-solved scenarios, and you can't. It's only 100 big blinds. It's only 6 max. So there's definitely like a lot of different variables because obviously you're almost 200 big blinds. So you're not going to get the types of outputs. But I just kind of wanted to see what the response is from what you're going to do. So, okay, the pot's 600. It comes out 7 of spades, 8 of clubs, 3 of spades. Okay. Oh, excuse me, 7 of spades, 6 of clubs.
6 of clubs.
Yeah, 6 of clubs, 3 of spades. Okay.
And I actually did run this one in Pio just out of curiosity. I'm not an expert at that or anything, but I got some interesting stuff, outputs, and I was just curious what you think of it. So I checked, and the button bets 180. So really small.
Uh-huh.
And I decided to check raise to 560. Sort of for protection.
Right. So this is exactly what I wanted to see because I wanted to see which hands get to check raise. Now, from what Solver Plus had said, and also too from what I remember in these certain spots when I used to do top section with Conlon, and I'm pretty sure you're a top section guy, it would prefer hands that have like a backdoor and an additional equity, meaning that, if you were to choose the best combo of 8-8 to do this with, it would prefer to have a spade. It would also prefer to have 5-out draws here as well, meaning that it would, I'm sure it would prefer to take 8-7 with a backdoor here and do that as opposed to like 8-8. I talked about this last week on content where, you get into certain situations when, from the flip side, when you're thinking about like calling, say, flop C bets, and someone's like, oh, I've got pocket 7s, and the board's like, Jack 10-3, right? And it's like, well, if you're behind, you only really have like 2 outs, right? But if you have like a pair and it's a 5-out draw, or if you have a hand like Queen 9 or something like that, you have so much more future equity. If you're looking at a pocket pair and holding on, it's a 2-out draw. And then if you look at, say, like middle pair and a backdoor flush draw, it could be a 6-out draw. That's 3 times more equity moving from street to street. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is not check raised without the 8 of spades necessarily in your hand. And if you had a hand like 6-5, that would get check raised even more. What did Pio say about your specific combination?
When I ran it, the interesting thing was if I gave it multiple bet sizings, it actually preferred to bet 3/4 pot on this flop. But obviously, I think the guy's probably betting small with this whole range. So I locked it into a small bet size, and then it had me raising 20%. And you're right, the 8 of spades was definitely preferred. It had the eights with the 8 of spades was raised at about 34%, and eights no spade was less than 10%, like 8 something. So definitely the back door, which makes sense. And I thought about that when I did it. I'm like, well, it would be better if I had a spade, but I sort of felt like he might overfold to a raise there on that board, but he called, so a not surprising. He can have a lot of overpairs and stuff in his range, I'm sure.
So now the pot's what,
call
17-20?
17-20.
All right.
And we go to the turn, and the turn is the 5 of clubs.
Right, and this is another interesting inflection point here too, because so the other thing about your hand is you do have some backdoor straightening equity here too, right?
Right.
So
and that's what I thought about when I raised it. I'm like, well, I better have a spade, but I do have a backdoor anyway. So
now
terrible.
I don't remember if I got to this point, or I think it was at this point, at least with Solver Plus, it became irrelevant, right? Because it was only pre-solved at 100 big blinds. So you're never going to get this turn output, right? When you're starting at 200 big blinds. So I was like, what's the point of even looking at this? Because it's either just going to be a jam. But, going with the theory here, obviously, if you take a step back and you're like, okay, I raise for protection with 8-8 here and I get called, most of the time that's going to skew people towards having overpairs, right? And you're not supposed to just continue on like relentlessly. Eights with the 8 of spades, maybe you continue on a front door sort of spade, but so you get called, he's going to be skewed towards having overpairs. You would think you'd just be giving up a lot with 8-8. However, on this card though, I specifically with the 10% quote unquote of times that you're sort of check raising here with 8-8, no spade, I would think this has got to be one of the best cards to actually continue to structure a bluff with here. You've picked up extra equity.
That's what I thought of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like, it's a great card for my range, but, besides maybe a spade coming in and, I pick up equity, but, then on the other hand, it's like, well, the flush hasn't come in, so is he going to fold to a bet on the turn with an overpair when he thinks I might have been bluffing with a flush draw? And, so I just wasn't sure what to do there, and it was like, well, I don't want to, I don't want to get blown off my hand either. If I bet and he decides to raise all in with aces or something, that's
he shouldn't really be raising all in with aces. I think the way that you manage the pot size is somebody and I think that's interesting too, is that you got to manage the pot size so that you never get him into a situation where he's faced with if he wants to continue jamming, right? So if you raised it to 560 and, you guys had put in 280 pre, so what is that? Like you've got like what, 2,300 left, something like that?
Just over 2,800.
Just over 2,800. So you don't want to take a bet size that's going to basically, even if it's like 1,000 or more, like if you bet 1,000, if he called the pot's 37, he only has like 18 left, he still, I guess, has a half pot size bet. I don't think you need to go crazy large. Some people's like response here would be like, oh, why don't we just bet like 1,600 bet pot? Well, it's a disaster if the guy jams, right? If he recognizes the situation. So I think maybe a more efficient thing here would be to bet like 1/3, 600 to 800. And then again, if you had structured with like, supposedly with the 8 of spades, maybe you can follow through on some spade rivers. You're probably not supposed to do that necessarily with this particular card, but you give yourself some leverage at the end, I would say. You definitely don't want to make that mistake of getting him to jam turn, that's for sure.
Once he calls the flop, I guess we're sort of thinking that our hand is probably not good. Now, This is maybe where Pio isn't that accurate, because he's supposed to be calling that flop bet with 75% or something, I think. So he's calling with even hands like ace queen, with no flush draw and stuff like that. So he ends up with a lot of ace high and overcard hands that I'm not sure that he's actually going to be calling with, in live. But then what Pio said on the turn was the 8 of spades should be bet, about 60% frequency. But 8s with no spade, it had checked at 100% frequency, which I'm not really sure why that is. I didn't.
I don't necessarily know I don't necessarily know off the top of my head. I mean, again, just to simplify this, I just, sometimes we look at certain situations where we're like, oh, maybe we'll like bet large on this street and then just give up. I'm just saying that it would be a disaster here to have sort of our equity denied, basically. And then maybe it's a function of that, where if you had the 8 of spades here, so I don't know, it's a function of that you could bet call there, although there isn't 3 spades out there. I'm not exactly sure, but you just don't want to get necessarily jammed on if you were to go super large. So what did you end up doing?
I ended up checking, and he thought about it a little bit and checked back,
Okay.
which, I guess is, he can be checking a lot of repairs. It's not a
Yeah,
good
he's
card
not
for him.
necessarily that
There's two
he's
flush draws out there, so I
right.
I thought he might bet some low repairs, but he did check it back.
Curtis King says Pio is like the media. You can't trust it. Curtis must be a GOPer. Right, so 7635. Of course, there's a one-liner out here to a 4 here, though, too, right? So,
right.
That's why I think that the small sizing, too, like he might have to move off of some overpairs here, though, too, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I didn't
it would definitely not be an easy call.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I should have just mentioned that before. I'm just staring at it. There's a one-liner here to a 4. It's not just like, it's even if a guy's got kings here and you go like 800-900, it's a pretty hard call to make, right?
Right.
So it goes check, okay.
And the river is the 4 of spades.
The 4 of spades. So 7-6-3, turns a 5, river's a 4. And now it puts a third flush card out there, right? It also puts a straight out there, right? The board is 7-6-3, 5-4, but you have a straight, a higher straight, meaning that you don't play the board, you beat the board. When he goes check here on the turn of the pot 17-20, I can't imagine this is ever a big bet here. I think that this is probably going to be 1/3. I think I would probably go 600, 5 to 600 here. And the thing here at that point, it's one of those laying a price for your opponent. So say your opponent has an overpair, right? That's not going to play on a straight board here. If you bet 600 and the pot's 1700, he's calling 600 to win 850. He's almost only getting 1-1 because he doesn't win your money. He's calling to chop. So anything over that amount, like if you bet 1,000, now he's calling 1,000 to win, say like 850. Also, too, you have to understand that it's the spade that comes in. So when you take a look at, your check raising range on the flop, if it consists of some flush draws, although I would imagine that a lot of those flush draws would continue on the turn, he loses to those too. So whenever he's going to be getting like less than 1-1, it's just an awful run out for like red kings here or something like that, right? Where I just can't imagine the most efficient way here would be to bet anything more than 1/3 here at the end.
He's certainly going to call the chop with like you say, it makes it really tough for him, and it's not, he can actually call the chop and lose to a flush that I have.
Right.
So
or an 8, or an 8.
Right.
But I'm saying I don't think you can go too large, though.
Really thinks I don't know if you really would put me on an 8 checking the turn. It's possible, I guess.
Here's the thing. It's a 3-bet pot. I get that. I just, again, I don't want to overthink it, like put myself in your villain's perspective, but it's such a terrible run out for what you are representing. If I was your opponent, I would not call 1,000 here. I would not call 1,000 to win. I don't think 850. So I think it's maybe 600 to 800 here to try to get him to give like 1-1 or something like that is the right sizing.
Do you ever check any value hands?
No. Fuck no.
Never.
No.
That's what I did.
I don't think so.
I thought that was a mistake at the end, but when the flush card came in, I thought, well, that's a terrible card. Like I can't.
Oh, and by the way, too, by the way, if the river is an offsuit 4, right, instead of a 4 of spades, you definitely get to go like larger, 12 to 1,300, and you're gonna get calls, because now he doesn't have to worry about a flush, right? So, but I just think that if you check, if you check, basically what you're doing is allowing some hands that would call a bet to just check behind and take the chop. I don't know if you were thinking that like you were going to try to get the guy to turn hands into like flush bluffs or get you off the chop, but usually the person who's first to act has that advantage. Remember though, too, this is a 3-bet pot. The button has 3-bet you. You're going to have more of this stuff than he is from him 3-betting. So you checked?
So I checked, and I got lucky. He moved all in. And
he moved all in?
He moved all in.
Wow. So for how much? So button moves all in for how much?
28-10.
Wow. I think a straight you have to call, but that's a crazy bet. actually. I mean, that's
When I
1.5x.
thought about it, I mean, I checked with the intention of, thinking, well, if he's a thinking player, he's going to realize that I should never be checking a flush here, and it sort of gives him a green light to try to get me off a chop, and then I can just call his bet. And then he went all in. I'm like, well, that's a crazy size, but I don't think I can fold.
Well, I mean, I think
And,
going along with your logic here too, like it's like, again, it's I think somewhat of an illogical bet size from his perspective, just like probably making a large bet from your perspective from up front is probably a little bit illogical here too, because you probably on these types of rounds you'd probably want to take the same type of size with everything here, and you take a step back at this and you're like, why would a guy move all in with a flush here for 2,800? I can't call because it's not like you can bluff catch against him and win the pot, right? If you don't have an 8, the best you can do is chop. So that's why, like, in these scenarios where somebody actually has something that's better than the board and the board is playing like a 5 straight, that's when you see a more consistent type of sizing, right? But it sounds to me like you're like, this doesn't make any sense, right? Why would he jam here with the flush?
No, and I guess he just, and my thought was, well, I've given him the green light to, basically try to move me off the chop, and he thought all in is the way to do it because he thinks, well, there's no way I have a flush, and it came in, and I guess he can have some flushes here. I mean, the turn card, if he's, calling with a flush draw and, that bad card comes, maybe he just doesn't want to, get blown off.
Well, he can certainly have some flushes. He can certainly have some flushes. I do though question the sizing though, because if you are sort of playing a sort of more advanced kind of game of kind of range versus range here, because you are getting such a worse price if you don't play the board, you can't really call. So if he has a flush, then what are you calling with for 28-10? And I don't think he can necessarily balance that out. Maybe with some people are saying aces with the ace of spades might be too. But, when you look through this, I think you'd certainly have a call the way this is going down. So you called?
Yeah, I called. Mm-hmm. And I called and he said chop, and, he had kings with no spades. So,
wow.
Obviously he didn't expect to see the eight.
I don't know if kings with no spades supposed to be doing that, but that's very interesting. And again, we can look at many, many levels here because it's like, who first misplayed the river? What's the optimal response? Because he might be like, well, you don't have a straight or a flush because you checked. Well, maybe one of the best things that you could have done, I mean, my first reaction was, no, I would not have checked, but maybe you're supposed to check some of the time with some of your weaker flushes or your 8x to protect the fact that he can't just move all in off of a chop, right?
Right. Just for interest's sake, what Pi said on the turn, it had me checking 100% with my hand. And it had him betting aces, kings, and queens, but it had him checking almost all of his flush draws, which I was sort of surprised by. But he's supposed to check back almost all his spade draws
on the flop. On the
turn.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean you don't think that makes sense? That makes sense.
Well,
to me.
It kind of does. I was a little surprised that he wasn't bluffing with any flush draws, but
no, because if he has a flush draw and you check raise the flop, and then you check the turn on a one-liner here to a 4, you're not check folding. You still, you now it skews you towards having value, right? If he has the flush draws, the front door, right?
That does make sense.
So
it does make sense.
So it makes me, and if I was in this guy's spot, I would be checking back flush draws a lot here also on the turn. I think a live hack that I might do, I don't think I would move all in for 28-10, but this is a Crush Live Poker Forte, like sort of live hack, and this is similar to people getting counterfeit, the true sense of being counterfeit, meaning when somebody like has a flush on the turn with 2 cards and then a 4th flush suit comes out. I've always said, like, if you have the ace of spades here, you can sometimes actually go larger than you would think because people will get frustrated and call sort of out of kind of like a tilt type of thing. So if I had a flush here and I was in your opponent's perspective and I played it this way, maybe I might go slightly larger, thinking that I might get like a frustration call from somebody that had actually flopped something, even though they're only playing the board. Right. But I don't see how you go for like 28-10 though. But anyways,
on the river, the 8s were supposed to be bet and check 50-50, and so it was, according to Pato, but live, I think you're right. I should have went for a bet there, but it happened to work out.
Yep. All right, man. Thank you. Thank you very much for the
Thanks,
call.
Bart. Have a good one.
All right. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for us. Thank you for joining. It was a fun show. I'm a little bit, I was going to tell you guys this at the top, but I forgot, but I'm a little bit, almost to the point of, I'm a little bit hysterical, like mentally. Like I had 2 hours of sleep last night. So if I said some disjointed things today that didn't make sense, like in certain spots, it's the lack of sleep. You go through those different phases. Now all of a sudden I'm getting like hot. You start to go through hallucinating. I had to wake up early to drive my wife for the vaccine at 6 in the morning. I couldn't get to sleep last night. So running on fumes here. But if you want to watch some live poker, head over to TCH Live right now. If they're 5-10 uncapped game going on, tell them Bart sent you. And then tomorrow night, I actually cut their best of highlight reel from TCH Dallas last week. We put it up on Saturday. It was the largest and craziest 5-10-20 game I've ever seen. There were 2 pots over $30,000, multiple pots over 10-20. The Austin game doesn't get that big. I'd love to get into that Dallas game, though, at some point. Obviously, I live in Austin, but the Austin game is still great. But yeah, head over there. Pretty entertaining stuff. And again, if you want to get on the show, shoot me an email, bart@crushlivepoker.com. I will always give Crush Live Poker subscribers priority. And even if you're not a CLP sub, head over to crushlivepoker.com, check out the new site. And again, if you want to, you can sign up for free too. That's an option. But if you want to take a look at some free Peter videos, you can sign up for free. And then the videos will be in the header, or you don't have to sign up and you scroll down the bottom of the page and you can click on videos and then look for free bonus videos. And I think Stay in School Peter did like the first 15 videos if you sort of like how he thinks about poker. But anyways, guys, thanks for keeping it real. And we will see